do you cover applicants with pre-existing health conditions?
Well, yeah, this one is a good question. I mean, obviously, especially considering the poll you've sent, yeah, many people are considering, moving to a different country. It's often in the context of retirement or pre-retirement. But yeah, well, let's be honest, when you're 50, 60-ish or plus, you probably had something in your life, even if it's minor. So it's not a big deal, medically speaking, I mean. But they do require you have a policy that comes without any kind of medical exclusion. So it's not even a matter of having these covered. It's also a matter of it is mandatory that you are covered, and if you have medical history or conditions, that they are covered. Well, then it gets tricky because technically speaking, it's impossible to get, it depends on what you have. If you tell me you have asthma, it's quite easy to get covered. If you tell me you've had cancer or heart issues or, complex stuff, no insurance company around the world will get you covered. They're private companies. They're here to make profits. Unfortunately, this is, where we're living in. And so until you're part of the French national scheme, it's impossible to get that covered. So how could we meet this? Well, then the loop around is, it's important to understand that visas are a highly political tool. And there's actually something, I mean, Visa and I, we've experienced this a couple of years ago. I mean, in 2021, actually 2 times in a row in a very short period of time. For example, when, the UK and France were kind of arguing in regard to the stance they should have with the fishermen, on the English Channel. And at that period, we've had quite a few denials for visa applications coming from the UK because of the political situation, kind of made it more difficult. So we've had the same thing with Australian citizens when we had the story with the submarines that were cancelled, the order that was cancelled with the French military government, and somehow the British government was also part of the mix. So we've had some difficulties. I mean, it didn't last long, a couple of weeks, couple of months sometimes. So it's basically very short. But then we have rejections or denials, and you need to apply again for unknown reasons. And that is part of the reason. So actually, they know it's not possible to meet that expectation. But if everything is good, which is the current state of the world right now, except if you're coming from Russia, unfortunately, if you're from any country we don't have any, litigation with at the moment, everything's fine. You still need to meet the requirement on paper, though. So, but basically what I mean is they won't dig deeper to see if you're really covered. So basically, if you have a policy that do not disclose whatever it's covered or not, so it's not a lie, so it's not disclosed on the certificate of insurance, it's usually fine. Again, that's why it's very important to go with someone who knows the drill. Because otherwise, they don't know that requirement. If you call an insurance company, whatever it is, their job is not to sell visa applications or to go through visa processes. They probably don't know about that stuff. So what you should be doing is most of the time we go with policies that have something we call a moratorium, which is basically an automatic exclusion of medical history, which prevents them from going through a medical assessment, which would probably end up with the denial of their application, and also makes the application way faster. And at the end of the day, it's also important to understand that, well, it depends on the country, but in France, should they have something that's excluded on the policy, we don't leave people die on the sidewalk. So basically, they'll be treated anyway. The way the system works is that, if you have to go to the ER, for example, obviously, if you're privately insured, they go through private insurance first. But if private insurance denies the payment, then you can, obviously, they'll double check. Can you pay yourself out of pocket? So if the answer is also yes, then they'll make sure you pay out of pocket. But if the insurance doesn't pay and you cannot pay out of pocket, you'll be covered anyway. It's also the culture of the country.
That's very reassuring. And yeah, it seems to be the case across the board that as long as the paperwork that is submitted meets the requirements, it'll pass. But you do need somebody that knows what requirements those are.